Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another Monday night in the political consciousness of West Coast Steeler fan to an imperfect union. A few things I want to talk about tonight, uh, and none of them have to do with the Ukraine, but we'll get into that as we go along. I see that the first person in the queue tonight is Mr. Carroll. Good evening, Bill. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing fine. Looks like you just got in from a meeting.
Yeah. We, in fact, amongst the uh, guests that we had there is Captain Alcala of the Southside Chicago, commander of the Southside Chicago Recruiting Company, and two of her sergeants, Sergeant First Class Chanza and Sergeant First Class Villafuerte were also there. But yes, we had a few things to take care of, and it's good to be here. I hope all's well with you.
Yes, we finally have California weather back in California.
Oh, okay.
We had a record cold spell. It got down to 33 degrees in San Diego. So looks like when I went to Texas, I brought some of that weather back with me. But there are a few interesting things to talk about this week. I saw a lot of news devoted, of course, to the Ukraine. And I wondered, how we use anything as a diversion. And I'm not, this is not to poo poo the plight of the Ukrainians, but there are a lot of neighborhoods here in the United States that are actually under siege.
Sure.
Uh, which,
I mean, we hundreds of thousands have died in the Tigrayan conflict. I mean, like there's a list of things as large or larger that are going on in every part of the globe you could pick. Uh, and whether you see the unseen hand of conspiracy or you think it's something as simple as people find terrible things happening to white people fascinating, people find terrible things happening to non-white people boring. I mean, there's a lot of reasons that one could point out, why certain things get so much attention and others get virtually none. There were two large bloody wars going on the continent of Africa now as we speak, and nary a peep, right? Nary a peep on the American, mass media front. So, yeah, I mean, there's lots of things to focus on, and then you look at how and why certain things get chosen. It's always interesting.
and how less than a month ago, we had people talking about, uh, you know, we didn't have this money or we didn't have money. We don't have money for infrastructure. We don't have money for internet. And these are not, I'm not just talking about in the black community. I mean, there are rural,
Rural, right?
you
Exactly.
know, there are real communities, that are connected by bridges and don't have access to the internet. And we cannot find the appropriations for this because it'll cause inflation. But
Well,
at the stroke of a pen, we can find what $350 million, $1 billion. I mean,
whatever,
whatever it takes.
whatever it takes. Yep. So you and I both know that there are lots of things that I remember when I was about, I don't know, 7, 8 years old, seeing, and I'm from a very conservative part of the world, but I saw a bumper sticker somewhere that said, "We'll know that this is truly a country that has embraced education when they have to have a bake sale for a nuclear submarine and all of our schools are fully funded." Um, there's always been an American obsession with force, right? Since the earliest days of the nation, right? When there was virtually no standing army. And of course, I think that's part of what, the sort of, what's the word they like to use? The catalytic event, right? And once again, history is taught incredibly poorly. But if you really read history and you read about the War of 1812, I truly believe some part of America never fully recovered from the sight of the White House being burned, right? And Dolly Madison and James Madison to flee for their very lives, and our president being this close to being captured, right? Which is, I would bet that probably 92% of Americans don't have a really good grasp of exactly what happened during the War of 1812. But I truly believe.
But see, Bill, there was a difference there because it was the British that did this.
Sure.
Suppose it had been a contingent of slaves or indigenous people,
or most terrifying of all, a mixture of the two, right?
Right,
that's the real nightmare, right? Is that they team up. That's why the people talk about the longest American wars, and the longest, though it was never a declared war, but the longest war on our soil, at least, was the one against a contingent of both Seminole and Black people that went on from late 1700s till sometime in the 1820s, and it was never officially, since it was never officially began, it never officially ended. But I can tell you that there are places where, for a very long time, if you were a white person, where it wasn't safe to go in certain swamps in Florida ever.
Bill,
again, I wrote an article about Fort Negro, the Negro Fort in Florida.
They don't teach you about the Seminole Wars.
They don't teach you about lots of things. That's what I said earlier about American history. But getting back to what we were originally talking about and how we got to this place where we're all focusing on this one thing and ignoring all these other things. America's obsession with force, I really believe, at least to some extent, that catalytic event was, though we don't study it, or we don't study it, it's not talked about as a lost war by every military standard I know of. It's a lost war. They burned the Capitol, right? They controlled the sea lanes. They won virtually every large-scale engagement. The only one they didn't win was the one that took place after the war was already over, which is, of course, the Battle of New Orleans, which we celebrate, but the war was already over. Word traveled slowly in those days. But by every standard I learned as a young military officer, that was a lost war, right? But you wouldn't know it reading American history books. That you wouldn't know that we lost the War of 1812. And by we, I mean them. So there's this fascinating dichotomy because America always wants to look like the good guy, even when America is clearly not the good guy. Oh my God. While we're on the subject, and I'll get off this quickly, read if you can find a good, real history of the Mexican-American War or the Spanish-American War for that matter. Woo! Once again, empire building, right? That's what it is. It's about empire building. That's not how it was taught to you most likely in school, I'm willing to bet. But that's clearly what it was about. Manifest destiny, all the cool things, giant land grabs.
Big words for gangsterism.
Yes, there you go. Gangsterism. Yes. You're right. I hope you write an American history book because I'd read that one. The thing that is at the root of it is this fear. Well, obviously Black and brown people, and anybody who's not, part of the club. But beyond that, there's this need to be able to whip yours out and have it be bigger, right? Let's really get down to the nitty gritty. America wants, when it comes down to it, to whip theirs out and have it be the biggest. Not almost the biggest, not close to the biggest, the biggest. And so this obsession, I truly believe, like I said, it was born with that lost war that is never discussed as a lost war, the War of 1812, where ours clearly wasn't the biggest, and we vowed never to have that happen to us again.
Thank you for joining us there, Mr. Scott. I just saw you on another show there in your city, you and your sister.
I was
talking about your book, and it was a very good show. I'm glad you sent me the link. It showed a lot of things.
There was a gentleman, James, on the show. The show was about, there's a lady, she has a nonprofit called Sweet Potato Comfort Pie.
Yes.
And what she does is she uses the pies to engage people about conversation about Black people, and she uses that as the hook. And she's really made a lot of inroads. She's been on Rachel Ray. She's been on some national shows talking about this concept that she has. And another thing, so we featured our book, but we also featured some local people, a couple of cooks, a couple of chefs. I shouldn't say that. And a great singer.
Yes,
that's right. Ginger Commodore. And see, I've known Ginger. We went to school together.
Oh.
We played in the Sounds of Blackness together. Oh. And she is one phenomenal singer. So she gave an interlude. And then
actually, before you came on and the band came out, I was expecting to see you back there playing bass or guitar.
I can't get around, So no, they had a great guy. This guy, is an African, Johannes Tona. Oh man, it was a good band. But
yes, it was.
They also had the two ethnic cooks, where the one lady, she made something that I had never heard of: black-eyed peas pancakes.
Well, she used the black-eyed pea roux, and she also made the sweet potato pancakes.
Yes, then she made some sweet potato pancakes, and she said she took the black-eyed peas and crushed them up and turned them into like a powdery type of substance and made. So I've got to try that. I mean, that's a must right there. I got to try it. And then the gentleman that cooked in this little town, St. Joseph, Minnesota.
Right, with the shrimp.
With the shrimp, he had a New Orleans type of thing. And while she was talking to him, I realized that I know his father, because she was talking to him, and he was saying that his mother was the longtime principal at St. Paul Central High School. I mean, she just kept that school open when they wanted to close his brother's school. Mm. But his name is MacB. But there was a guy that played for the Vikings named Ursel MacB. Okay. And I think that is his. See, when I went to Mankato in 68, 69, so the Vikings trained there.
Right.
Right on campus. I mean, I could go throw the ball with them ahead of time. I mean, it was no big deal. So I'd hang around with Ursel and Charlie West. Oh, Jim Marshall. Man, he was big time party.
Yeah. I remember Albert Dubinion.
But I never saw Alan Page there, with the partying part. I mean, he's, justice of the Supreme Court here in Minnesota now. So, but yeah, the program was, I thought it was good. I don't know. What did you think, James?
It was very good, but I also thought it pointed out something. And I don't know, since you live there, maybe it's something that you can explain to us later. But why is there such a difference between twin cities? I mean, you have a young Black mayor in St. Paul, and yet you keep electing the same dumbass officials over there in your city. I mean, the example is right across the river.
We also had two other guests on the show. A lady named Tony Carter, who is the head of the Ramsey County Board, and her son, Melvin Carter, who's the mayor. of
right,
St. Paul.
of St. Paul.
Yeah, of the mayor of St.
Of
Paul.
St.
But
Paul.
see
But
what
yet
that
you,
points
but,
out, James, see what that points out
ho-
on here.
but hold on now.
Okay,
This,
I was gonna
this,
explain it to you.
this is the same mayor that refused to issue a no-knock warrant in St. Paul, but yet your mayor issued the same warrant in Minneapolis and cost a life.
Well, the little man is not my mayor, but anyway, all right. Anyway, but what that points out in St. Paul, where you have this is Melvin Carter the third, okay? I grew up with Melvin Carter the second. He was a retired policeman in St. Paul. Melvin Carter the first, when I first started playing music in St. Paul, his dad was a trumpet player and taught everybody how to play the three Carters. So I know the whole, but that shows you how St. Paul is. See, St. Paul has a lot of people that have been there and that have a foothold in that city, where Minneapolis is very transient. You know, now you have the Somalis, you have all kinds of different people that, and then they fool around with the voting lines. They just changed them again and took one county or city area away from us, so we got less votes. So they do all of those things. But St. Paul really just has a better foothold of black people in that city than Minneapolis. Minneapolis just doesn't. So, and the little mayor is not my mayor. Okay, so that's
Dr. Casey, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing pretty well, and you guys. Um, Bill, your haircut looks nice.
Thank you.
I like your fresh. Uh, I've been doing really good. I have spent this whole month honoring my family and my grandmother's like about 40 articles of her community activism and stuff. So it has been a very interesting month.
Um, just to kind of give you a little background about some of the things that we talked about before you came on, even though I said that I wasn't really intending to talk about Ukraine, I find it amazing that we can't find the money for infrastructure, we can't find the money for education, we can't find the money for the internet. But as soon as there is a quote unquote white nation in peril, we find, I mean, you know, we can get the money from out of the sky. I mean, you know, there's no, it's unlimited resources. We can find room for 500,000 Ukrainians in Europe, but we can't find room for 5,000 Africans.
Okay,
But
let's start
the,
here. Wait. Because the debt ceiling is fake. In the sense of it is a man-made concept to control the future spending of what could be, but it's totally based on unrealistic projections that nobody ever expected the world to be exactly what it is right now. So they didn't even think about what would come in the future. They was only thinking about right then. So the first thing that we need to do is eliminate the unnecessary shit that goes on in America. It's a lot of it. I mean, it's just a lot of things that don't even make sense. And then in talking about Ukraine, the part of the conversation that I jumped in on, where y'all were talking about the racism portion of the grand scheme of things, and I just literally watched a video clip of different media outlets all talking about they're most concerned because it's a or a European nation with blue eyes and blonde hair, and they could not imagine this civilized world being in an uproar like this. But and then they comparing it to all Syria, all African nations, Afghanistan, Iraq, and saying it's normal there, but in a Europe place where only white people live, it's supposed to be more civilized than this. We can't imagine. And that shit is just tripping me out because how the hell like the other part that I have been talking about, and I probably won't mention it no more after this because it might put me in somebody's watch list. Is that what I also notice is that it keeps talking about the European nation or continent as its own thing, like it stands alone. It doesn't, but the way that the perception is like, well, it gives me the sense, let's go here, that NATO and all of these organizations, the protection is of Europe and Great Britain. And when I think about how the United States started, how they was escaping Europe and trying to find land somewhere else, and they stumbled across here, uh and the perceived independence, which we still honor, respect, and revere Europe and the UK. It's really confusing when you think about the grand scheme of things, because we're not really independent, because everything we're doing now is to protect that. And the whole biggest thing to me, what it seems is that the whole concept is that they don't want black people, brown people, because we are not really black. Technically, black means pale, but the goal is to keep us downward. Because who are they when you talk about NATO? Who do they come together to protect themselves against? Like, I don't really get it, aside from keeping the narrative of the fact that they used to worship black deities, and all of this is being suppressed information at this point. And it seems like more so that the goal is to keep brown people suppressed with a lack of information and a lack of knowledge. And this is where critical race thinking and all of that comes in, because if you begin to open up this can of worms, it's gonna be like an anaconda like snake fixture of Medusa type things coming out, because it's so much that is hidden, kept secret, distorted for obvious reasons to me at this point.
Well, it is
And
too, and then you see bits and pieces of it, and you see, like you say, what is going on.
it's
Sometimes
it's
you
it's
see,
all chopped and screwed. Like they put pieces strategic. I mean, I bought 4 books about the Vatican. I'm just buying shit that I probably shouldn't even be reading and talking about out loud, because it makes me feel like they gonna view me as a threat if I know too much.
but
It's a lot. It's a lot.
you see, uh, my thing is this: there are i- a lot of communities at war that have been at war, some since the so-called civil rights era. As as the war on poverty and Watts decreased since
But the
the
goal is not really that for America as a government. The goal is to keep, in my opinion, from what I see, it's good to make people be suppressed. It's good to keep people in fear. I don't know if media is totally fear based, but because when I'm looking at these papers and stuff from the 1920s and the late 1800s, when I'm looking at my family, it looked like they used to write about parties. They used to write about the most randomest things back then, and
Yep.
now they're filling it up with things that's happening, and they fill it up instead of with parties and senseless things. They're trying to fill it with some type of meat. It's just a lot. It's a lot. I feel overwhelmed just talking about it right now.
well now I want to start this conversation with you, Mr. Scott, because your family has written various books. Your father, and as I just said today, I saw your sister on the show with you,
yeah,
and
yeah,
you were
Dr.
talking.
Scott, she's Harvard master's, Columbia PhD. She went through and has the credentials, but gets us into a lot of different doors. So she's good. And if you met her, you'd never know it. If you met her, you never know it. She's down
Well,
there.
one of the things that I'm thinking is today is February 28th. No leap year. Today's the last day of February.
It is.
As you know, this is Black History Month. But as you also know, we have went through changes in the school libraries of various states: Virginia, Florida, Georgia, some of the western states, even Texas, Nebraska, I believe, where we have seen books that are being banned. Um, so I'm kind of wondering, now that Black History Month is over, is Black History over, Mr. Scott?
Well, of course not. I mean, they're gonna put you in a box and put you in the thing. You can't pay attention to them. But but you have to take advantage of that when it's there. I mean, over the years, I've done. I mean, before the COVID and things, I mean, I was doing a lot of high profile things for Black History Month. I mean, I spoke to the head of the Minneapolis Star Tribune, which is the paper in this state, and the publisher was at the meeting, sitting right in the front. So, but no, I mean, I continue to work. It's just I'm more busier for whatever reason. And as far as what they're doing in the schools, I mean, this was Dr. Casey is saying. It's such an assault on us, and it has been. I mean, this has been from day one. It's been nothing but an assault on us, and really, as you see how this thing is going with this war and all this, and now they're over there so concerned about what's over here, and you see pictures of the Putin. He's sitting at a table, and other people sitting at a table 10 miles away from him.
Yep.
Show that he's so big, or whatever. Why is that? It's almost like these things happen as a distraction, because all this stuff is happening here that we need to take care of. But then all of a sudden now they got us thinking about what's going on over there.
But they just bombed Africa recently too. Like, and nobody's really talking about that part.
Of course.
Ain't nobody mentioned that.
No, of course not. Of course not. Of course not. That things
I mean,
over
the U.S. Let's be very specific. The U.S. specific just bombed Africa.
Yep.
But they made at rest.
As military, the folks have been in the military. I mean, how do you view these kind of things?
hold on, because if you probably didn't get the memo, but I'm going to address that in our last segment, because I'm pretty sure
it's difficult.
well, I'll answer your question this way, Mr. Scott. I wear this not because I'm patriotic. I wear this in honor of the men that I fought beside and the men that died with me. Has nothing to do with America. Has nothing to do with the red, white, and blue. I never said the Pledge of Allegiance in the middle of a firefight. I don't know, Bill. Have you?
I searched my memory pretty thoroughly. There were things I said in the middle of a firefight, but none of them had to do with pledging or allegiances.
Not at no time. That's the last thing on your mind. You trying to come home alive.
Thank you. I'm thinking about this little thing back here. But hey, maybe I digress. But Bill, is Black History Month over? I mean, are we going to stop seeing, Fredrick Douglas on HBO and speeches adopted? I mean, Fruitvale Station is somewhere on my TV every day. Every day. Right. Okay. I mean, a lot of things that probably will not be on TV for the rest of the year.
Oh, most certainly. So here's what I can tell you. There will be some entities that will commit themselves to making it quote unquote Black History Month every month. And you will see in some areas and some, entities, corporations, etc., will make a good faith effort. I think is the term I would use. We make a good faith effort to be more quote unquote inclusive and expansive regarding these kinds of things. However, not everybody. That's always the way it is as well. It's always been kind of, especially when it comes to this kind of thing, it's if you ever go on one of those trips where it's 7 countries in 6 days, right? You wake up, you're in Luxembourg. By the time lunchtime rolls around, you're in Belgium. Dinner is in France. The next morning is in Italy. When we're being, quote unquote, exposed to Black history, it's always at warp speed, right? Hey, Althea Gibson, Jackie Robinson, Joe Louis. Enough from sports. Hey, then they might hit us with like, oh, look, it's Duke Ellington. Man, what the heck? Here's Lady Day for ballots. Hey, look, there's Jesse Jackson. And then, or Martin Luther King first. They finish up with Jesse. Martin Luther King, look, he had a dream. And now Barack Obama's president. Ta-da! And scene. So you always get sort of, and it's usually a triumphant like ending, right? Hey, because Americans love a happy ending. So they whiz you through this, like I said, whirlwind whistle stop tour of Black history, which ends on a high note. It always ends on a high note. It never ends with Trayvon Martin, right? They don't end with that. They always end with something to make you feel good. Leave them singing down the aisles, right? No, usually it's Barack. Look, there's Barack becoming president. Ta-da! And we won. So it's not over, but it's been commoditized, right? It's been, Nike sinks, I don't know the exact numbers, but I'm going to throw out a number. I'm willing to bet it's somewhere in the $110 to $20 million range, probably, of Black history related content, commercials, presentations, themes, accoutrement, right? Knowing they're going to make it all back, probably several times over. Ford, even, right? Ford of all people, like the Ford. Oh, the more you know about the Fords and the Ford Foundation, the funnier that one gets. But even Ford is like, go Black people, at least for a month. And so, as long as there's money to be made, I don't know if you're new to America, James, but as long as there's money to be made, no, it's not over. As long as we get, hey, look, it's kente cloth Nike. As long as there's money to be made, it's not going anyplace, man.
But they always soften it. They kind of soften it as they go along with these words like inclusive, diversity.
Yes.
These words that just,
we made our diversity even more inclusive. Now 15% more inclusive diversity.
I have trouble with words like inclusive, just like But anyway, Dr. Casey, despite, a lot of people might not know about the real ownership, but will we even have Black history on BET?
Okay, so normally, the predominantly Black stations are going to always play Black things because they're pushing the Black movement. But BET is not owned by Black people, so yeah. So moving right along from that, so normally it is a very great influx of Black history facts that are probably inaccurate during the month of February, and they do dwindle down once February is over. But a lot of that is because it's hype. It's almost like passing the any bill that they pass that don't really protect Black people, but they pass them like, okay, well, we're gonna give you this day. We're not gonna protect your liberties, but we're gonna give you a day, and we're gonna add another day and another day, everything but what you really want and what you really need in order to protect the people of this country. So, they're only gonna always do just enough. Um, goal, in my opinion, is black ignorance. They only want us to know what they need us to know in order for us to be manipulated to continue to go along with the flow of the show. And that's not how. If you change those things, if you really give real information, if you allow critical race thinking to really be like exposed, and for people to go in further and deeper and understand, it would change the world.
So what you're saying then is black people is in suspended animation.
Basically, it it is, the world is changing now because more black people are realizing that the information is at the palm of their hands. And more people are trying to look, and people are trying to share, and people are trying to expand the knowledge base. Where it comes to indigenous people, where it comes to actual African people that came to America on slave ships, and where it comes to people that was from South America, because the way America, the land, was conquered by the United States, the government, they just kind of moved people where they wanted them to go. So it Black history is never over, um, but
But
real
why these
history is
attacks?
limited.
I wonder, why these attacks on these? I've been hearing about the HBCUs,
Yep.
that there
You
have
talk
been
about the
several bomb
HBCUs
threats.
that
Yes.
are
Right.
actually about white people that came about
Well,
the
Yeah,
that's a good point too, because
but
my brother went to Alabama State and he played baseball there for 4 years at Alabama State in Montgomery.
see,
And that
wait.
whole he played for a coach that played in the Negro Leagues, and that team was all black, all brothers in there was on that team. I mean, and most of all the teams they played, Tennessee State, Florida A&M, all of them.
whose
Man, we went
names are on
online
the
because
documentation.
he's going back to Alabama State. They used to have a Turkey Day football, but I don't think they have that game. They moved it from Thanksgiving, I think, to another day. And so we went online to look at the baseball team, and it was all Mexican and white. There wasn't hardly no black
Well,
people
no, no,
on
you
the
you
Alabama
skipping way
State
past where I was talking
baseball
about.
team.
Yeah,
You skip way past what I was talking about, Mr. Scott. I'm talking about, Mr. Scott, that most of these HBCUs are funded and founded by white European Americans.
Yeah.
Yeah, with a
They're not
couple of
even.
exceptions, but yeah.
I mean, maybe a few, but not
I
large.
think I think it's about four that aren't, but the rest are, as you said, started by white endowment or something of that nature. But I wanted to speak specifically, and Dr. Casey, you and Bill might uh, want to start with this because Mr. Scott, I think it's actually my generation and your generation that are in suspended animation. I think the younger generation knows what's going on, but they have been hindered by the roadblocks that our dumbasses have put in the way because we thought we had overcome.
I, I,
I,
I, I
Really?
just think it's a misinformation, miscommunication. Because a lot of times the older generation, they had a foothold on their neck, and they couldn't do nothing. And the
still,
people now, the
Yeah.
the fear is the retaliation of it. The only way to get past that is to do it in a mass effect. Like, the only way that they gonna be able to make Russia be fearful is if everybody band together and go against Russia. But everybody's scared of Russia because Russia got the nukes. They ain't trying to get nukes, and they know from
They had
the
crazy man in
last
charge.
check, uh 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 Russian people crazy. They'll lose fuse. So they scared. But it takes it's like defeating a bully. In order to defeat a bully, either somebody bigger and badder got to do it, or the collective got to come
Right.
together and say, you know what, we're gonna stop. But that's why it is more of a emphasis on
Yeah. But
black separation
if them over
and
there killing kids,
miscommunication.
if that don't get them going,
Killing
I
kids.
mean,
What you talking about?
Mr. Scott, how many black kids die in the black community every day? Come
I
on
hear
now.
you.
I mean, come on. Come on. You worried about a kid in Ukraine?
I
Worry
didn't
about
say it was worried. I'm
worry
just
about
saying.
that kid in
I'm
Chicago.
making a
Worry
metaphor.
about that. Worry
I'm
about
not
that kid
saying
in
I was
Chicago.
worried.
Worry, as a matter of fact, worry about that kid in Minneapolis, because you've had 7 children die in Minneapolis within the last 6 months. Why? Why? I know it might sound cruel and
He ain't never been to war.
inhumane.
Clearly.
No, I haven't. No, I haven't.
Let me tell you something.
I
Scott,
haven't.
they tell you the war,
So
them
I'm
gotta
with
go.
some vets. I realize that. I'm with some vets. I have nothing but respect. So,
Them kids gotta go too in war. Now, they should
Yeah,
let them black people out. What I tweeted the other day was Putin. If you really want to make the United States and NATO mad, help the black people. Do everything for the black people. Stand with the black people, and you'll piss everybody off. That's how I feel.
yeah.
They
Well,
don't like nobody to stand with the black people.
yeah.
no, I mean, but Mr. Scott, how does our generation take our blinders off, or more or less actually pass the torch to the younger generation without resentment?
What was the last part?
Without resentment.
Oh, well, I mean, I think that that's a natural thing. I mean, hopefully, we can impart on them what our people had to go through to get where we're at. That gives them strength to do what they have to do. I mean, there's really nothing to it. I mean, life ends. I mean, this is a thing that's doesn't keep going. But me, I have family. I have grandkids. And that's really what it's all about for me. And how do we do it? Oh, I help them. They know they've all got their degrees. They've all got their own homes. They're living their lives. And, I mean, I think that's how we impart it on. I have no ideals personally. You look at these people in the Senate. You look at these people that are 85, 90 years old. I mean, what are they doing there? What are they doing there? Why can't we get some younger people? That's one of the big problems, really. You want to say on our end, but look at what they're doing.
Well, hold on,
80,
Mr.
90
Scott.
years old.
Hold on, Mr. Scott. We're the ones that put them in there. We're the ones that voted them in.
The
When
problem is you
when
can't
they
get
were
them out.
when they were 30 and 35, we were the ones that voted them in.
That's right. The people voted them in. You're
No,
absolutely
no,
right.
no, no. Not the people.
Who's we?
Not
Who's we?
black. There's the people that look like me and you.
Well, I haven't seen those stats on that, I mean, but then we get into the
Come on,
Democratic
Mr. Scott.
Republican
Come on,
thing.
Mr.
No,
Scott.
wait a minute, wait a minute.
Shirley Chisholm.
Okay.
You can go on, go back in our history at the people that we have actually chosen to elect.
Okay. Well, baby, then term limits. Term limits.
But we didn't pass that. But we didn't pass that either.
Well,
That came up in our generation, and we didn't pass that either. Go, Bill, help me out here.
Well, there's a lot of things about term limits that are interesting to me. One, there's something to be said for people that even if they may be, somewhat, I don't know, corrupt, but actually know how the game is played, right? Because a lot of the problems that we've had recently is amateurs, right? A lot of on the job trying to figure out how to do this job. And while I think the answer isn't so much term limits, but publicly funding everybody and setting how much money you can spend and not allowing money from outside sources. I think that the real reason that incumbents are starting to beat is the money advantage. That's the real reason. I mean, name recognition is part of it as well, but money's the real. You want to really level the playing field? I'd be willing to throw in an extra $1 or $2, right, to fund all the federally funded elections and get the Koch brothers and all these other, entities out of funding so many people's the NRA and all these others. So the thing about term limits is that means that you're not just throwing out, the bathwater, you're throwing out the baby too. That means that the people that you want also have to go, right? It's not just you don't just get rid of people you don't like. They get rid of everybody if you set term limits. So if people can only serve 2 terms, whatever the limit is, somebody after 2 terms, you're just really figuring out how to make things work. You're just getting on the good committees, right? And boom, you're gone, and we're starting over with someone else who may not be as good. That's the fact.
We do
Like,
it with the
don't
president.
fix it; they just make it more interesting.
We do it
You
with the
want to
president.
get closer to fixing it, chase all that money out, and then it's a fair fight.
What do you think, though, Dr. Casey? We do it with the president, the most powerful position in our country. And you mean to tell me that a senator or
That nigga
a
ain't powerful.
congressman
He can't do nothing. He
No,
can't do nothing without approval. The president, in my opinion, is like a CEO or of a
he's the
company.
emperor.
He's
He's the
the
emperor
face.
he's the emperor with no clothes, unless
He's
somebody
the face. He's the marketing.
unless they vote a suit for him, he's the emperor with no clothes. Congress has to tell him the suit, what color it is, and when to wear it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly. So I think that we have a America and the citizens of the United States has a misconception of what power is and how power is managed in our country. So a lot of times, even the people that go into leadership, like Mr. Carroll was saying, they don't understand what they're really getting into.
Nope.
And anytime you have somebody new, when we say we want younger people, they have to get familiar with what the process really is, and instead of the misconception of what it is. Because a lot of people that are in office or that have been in office, they come from family line, a lineage of it. So they're just doing kind of passed down traditions. So getting somebody new in, you get 2 difficulties: getting the old person out, and then getting somebody who can kind of learn the ropes before they get in office. Because like with down here with Keisha Lance Bottoms, she probably could have been better, but she came in at the wrong time and she had no experience, so she didn't even know what to do. So when you get people in there and they don't even know like where to start or what to do, and they're
Yeah.
trying to just, like you said, learn along the way and use this, what somebody else did, and building a blueprint off of that, it makes it more difficult. And this is why education portion of it is so big, because you have to learn the tricks of the trade before you can really dabble in it and be successful at it in a way that will be productive. Because it's a lot of things that people think that they can do when they get in office, and they get in office and they be like, oh shit, can't do that. Oh, can't do that either. And and we think that people are making bad promises, but the reality is they promising things that they don't realize that they can't even do to begin with.
Go ahead, Mr. Scott. You want to comment?
Well, that just points out something that happened here with the Amir Laut case. I mean, Jacob Fry campaigned on no-knock warrants. That was his campaign thing. So, I mean, nothing but he just lied. That's how he campaigned on, and they voted him back in. So,
Now,
yeah, there's still the epicenter of what's going on here, and I don't know what. We really have an interim police chief. We have it's just it's sad to see. It's sad to see, and I'm hoping, boy, with all this money around, we should be able to get our hands on some and make our cities better. But
now,
I don't know.
now, Mr. Scott, if you don't have them on, I would suggest that you go get on a pair of steel toe boots, because I'm getting ready to step all over your toes. Okay. I watched your program. I watched your program Saturday with Don Allen when you
Oh,
guys
okay.
when you guys were interviewing
Right.
the black conservative
Right.
candidate from your
Don had
city.
a guest. That's right. Don invited a guest to the program, and Don's a
And
producer, and he sets up what we do. You're absolutely right.
but he does not put words in your mouth, Mr. Scott. No, he does
I
not
didn't
do that.
say that, but
And hold on now. And what I saw Saturday, I have never saw so much soft soap since I was in the army. I think you guys use more can of soft soap than I use to break in my pair of Cochrans. I have never seen you guys treat a candidate with such kid gloves. Not once. Now, you mentioned the fact that she was black and she was conservative, but not once did you ask her about the John Lewis Voting Act. Not once did you ask her how she, as a black conservative, was going to combat all of these other white conservatives that were passing bills, gerrymandering, districting, as you mentioned earlier. So how can we trust a black candidate that stands for white conservative values?
well, like I say, that's a guest, and Don has guests on, and the questions you have, James, I'll be sure to ask her that when I have lunch with her Wednesday.
Okay.
I'll be
As a
sure.
matter of fact, you can invite her to my program. I got some questions for her if you want to bring her on
I
here.
will. I'll mention that to the candidate. But yeah, I looked at this person's background. Don, we had a person. I don't know the person. I never seen her before.
Hold on. You
So
had a
I
white
looked at. I looked up.
you had a Republican candidate on 2 weeks ago that
Yeah.
you also soft soaped that I mentioned.
Oh. Well, Don's a Republican, so maybe you might want to put those questions to the
Oh,
producer.
I asked him on the air. I asked him on the
Oh,
air. Well,
okay.
what did he think about the John Lewis Voting Act? Hey, I have no shame. I'll ask you anything I want. If you put me on the program, evidently you want to hear my point of view.
As
Otherwise, you wouldn't. Otherwise, you wouldn't invite me. So as I said, when you have a conservative party that does not want you to vote, how can you be concerned about the black vote when they don't want you to vote to begin with?
well, I think James, having someone on your show, that's to get to hear what they have to say. To let the, what do you have to say, and ask them those kind of questions, and ask them, and as most candidates, I mean, she talked pretty much through the whole doggone thing. That's what they do, politicians. She just talk. Yeah, I asked her about her Blixit. I looked at when I looked her up, she's in the same ballpark as a Candace Owens. Okay, that's the same. That's the local Candace Owens is what you're seeing, and so I saw that and I just took it at that. I mean, a Republican is not going to win here. Okay. And there's a couple people that are going against Ilhan. I think there might be a Democrat or two that's even interested in it. But as far as a Republican, I don't see how they have a shot.
Uh, but Bill, what do you think? When you can't stand up for the voting rights of black people, how can you expect to earn their vote? Bill?
Yep. I mean, we've got a lot of solutions to the kinds of problems that we will never, well, I say never say never, that we'll unlikely get a chance to actually to tangle with. But what we can do, as was mentioned earlier, is we can work with friends, family members, neighbors, community members, young people, to say to them, you're going to hear a lot of stuff, especially if you live in America, about lots of things, including yourself. And a large percentage of things you hear about all these other things and yourself are going to be untrue. And here's how you gird your mental loin for that battle. You're going to have to fight until you draw your last breath. And if you're able to set up something like that, where you make it clear that propaganda is around you all day, every day, right? From the moment you're born to the moment you die. And while some propaganda is less obvious than others, and while some propaganda is so common as to be almost indistinguishable from quote unquote real news, that once again, the average person, I think, doesn't realize when they're being, I mean, sometimes they do, but most of the time, I don't think realizes when when propaganda is being shown to them or provided to them to influence their thoughts and behavior. And that was a part of what happened, back on January 6th. There's some pretty credible evidence that's been coming in to indicate that at least some of the planning and whatever else were people with ties, to the KGB. Shocker, but there's a bunch of things that face us, right? Some of which we've already talked about, and things we haven't even touched on. And unless and until, first of all, you have to define a problem in order to fix a problem, right? And for a long time, and once again, I'm not blaming anybody, James. I think the race problem, once again, now a 400 plus year old problem, was one that for a long time people didn't want to define it, right? They wanted to fix it without defining it. And so that's how you get affirmative action. That's how you get all these other things that are shotgun blast as opposed to a laser, because you don't want to. If you define the problem clearly, then you can aim a laser at it. But if you want the fuzzy wuzzy, right? America's basically good. We oopsied up a little bit. Here's a shotgun blast of goodwill, right? And you end up with these programs that are not particularly targeted towards Black people. They're targeted towards poor people, which some people think is pretty much the same thing. And often enough, it ends up being the same. But a lot of these programs do not specifically address Black people. And as we talked about, I think on a previous show, the number one and primary largest beneficiary of affirmative action back when it still had some teeth was white women. And now, it's been completely defanged, and you still hear the term bandied about, but it doesn't mean anything. I mean, it doesn't do anything. Like it doesn't, there's no there now when we talk about affirmative action. I mean, we're digging ourselves out, hopefully. We're trying, individually digging ourselves out. But what we don't have is that massive bully pulpit, right? I mean, say what you want about Martin Luther King, and we all have varying opinions on him. But one, he found the bully pulpit, or it found him, might be a better and more accurate way to put it. And he made use of it. And once again, you may not like everything came out of his mouth, you may not agree, but he made great, great, great use of it. We no longer have that, right? There's no longer that true bullhorn, blowtorch thing that reaches all Americans, because we live in the age of narrowcasting, not broadcasting. You can find, no matter what your political leanings are, you can find a news network that will match those, right? So we've got a Baskin-Robbins approach to this, the providing of information. Now, I'm big on BBC America and PBS for two reasons. One, they actually spend way more time on world news than we do in this country. PBS is this country, but commercial news in this country. And two, the reporting is just flat out better, just better in every way. And so it's part of that girding. When I talk about girding your loin, like getting actual good information and sharing it whenever possible with others. Counter programming, right, to the constant flow of propaganda that comes towards you all day, every day. And then, lastly, the classic each one teach one, like try to find some other person. You don't have to be young. You can be a person your age or older, but someone that you think will appreciate the information you have to share, and share
it. Dr. Casey, of course, he is the only Black senator, and he does happen to be conservative, is Tim Scott.
Yeah,
and if you want to know what Black conservatives stand for, this is the poster boy. Now, as I said before, maybe you can explain to me why I should put Black people in office when their counterparts don't even want black people to vote. So to me, these are, yeah, this is my show, house niggas. Because the only thing that they're doing is passing on the message of the people that have already tried to enslave us through propaganda. So these are the Samuel Jacksons of the Republican Party. Am I being too harsh?
Okay, so generally speaking, my opinion about this in particular is that a lot of people, again, they go in there with one mindset and then they get bamboozled and realize that they got to kiss a lot of ass in order to stay in them positions. But then on the other side, you got people who just because they look like us don't mean that they really for us to begin with, and they always felt like they had a white soul over being indigenous or a black soul, and they do whatever massa say, and it's no way to really get around that. You're going to always have people that seek to impress white people to the point to where they will violently disown their own, and some of it is internal, some of it is self-hate. Sometimes I personally believe that souls can regenerate, quote unquote, into another body. So in one lifetime, you may live as one person, one demographic, and I believe that in another lifetime, when your soul comes back or imparts into someone else, it's called a walk-in spirit. In the aspect that I'm speaking of, that person, just like with when you talk about people that have different sexualities or gender specific whatever, that too I believe is up under the same type of guise where somebody can come and their soul may identify as something other than who they truly are. Now, everybody don't believe like I believe, so I don't expect people to agree. But so I mean, people just want to be, people want to fit in. People want to be accepted. And some people will do whatever it takes until they realize that they'll get faced with a dilemma one day and they'll be treated poorly because they're still black. And then they'll be hit with the whammy and they'll still kiss ass, but it will humble them a bit.
Mr. Scott, am I being too harsh?
Being too harsh on what, Republicans or conservatives or
Uh, well, whichever. Aren't they the same? I mean, don't they consider
I,
themselves? I mean,
I
we just saw Donald Trump yesterday or day before at a CPAC conference trying to raise money, and people saying that they want him back in office. Now, you know, like uh, Dr. Casey said, in some cases, Donald Trump was the best thing that ever happened to black people because it made them wake the hell up and
Mhm.
realize that all of these little baby steps that we have been taking, Mr. Scott, the only thing that I know that we have gotten from Republicans, conservatives is Black History Month and Juneteenth.
yeah, well, that's I guess that's an accurate observation because I don't know anything about Republicans or conservatives. I mean, that hasn't been my thinking, and my thoughts are always when I look at, as we talked about, Tim Tom. I call him Tim Tom Scott. I'm so embarrassed. Why does he have to be a Scott? Why does he have to be? You know, why does that have to be his name? But
I
that shows you what the
I
Republicans think. They have one. They have one,
I
and
never
that's
associated with him, Mr.
but
Scott. I'm sorry. I,
so,
until,
but that shows you what they're about. They have just
Until he just said something. You ain't,
they
you,
don't
Mr.
have any
Scott, you
time
just
for.
brought it to our attention that y'all possibly related. We didn't even think about it until you just said that.
But that brings out my point. of Republicans. That shows you what they think. We're just here, to me, in their mind, in their political bent. Now, Minnesota, for whatever reason, it's been Democratic, and I want this governor to stop taking my money from my pension and my Social Security, because we're only 13 states that do that, and he's bragging about a 1.6 billion surplus.
They don't do that to mine. Mine straight pay.
I'm telling you, it's like, I don't want to hear that.
You better make somewhere else your home state like you did in the army. You wasn't in the military. I forgot.
They tax your Social Security. They tax your pension. This is one of only 13 states. I said, what the hell is going on here? I might have to go to Wisconsin because they don't do it.
I think California does tax your pension, but
Social Security?
As far as Social Security, though, they make sure your Social Security is pretty straight here. But Mr. Scott, you mentioned something a little earlier.
Mm-hmm. And come on, get to that award, that military question, because I got a lot to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this was by Fredrick Douglas, and it was in May of 1847.
Mm-hmm.
I have no. Let me make sure I read this right. I have no love for America. As such, I have no patriotism. I have no country. What country have I? The institutions of this country do not know me, do not recognize me as a man. I am not thought of or spoken of except as a piece of property. Now, in a country such as this, I could not have patriotism. So, Mr. Scott, do these words still have relevance 175 years later?
Of course they do. Then what it says that it's about what I think of myself. I don't give a damn what they think. I know what I can do. I live in this world. This is my world. Okay, I sail the ship or the ship don't sail in my area, in my life, with my family, with my house, with my property. And so they can think whatever they want, So, but yeah, it resonates, and it hurts to hear those kind of words from that man. Had to go through that. All he did for this country, all he did and had to go through for what? For what? A bunch of bullshit. That's what. And yeah, we still fight these same damn battles today. And it's, they do resonate. And when you read things like King from the Birmingham jail, letter from the jail, that kind of thing, how he had to go through and think of all that because we're black. Like the great Seal Johnson song, my man Seal from Chicago just died. Is it because I'm black? That song, so yeah, the words, man, I think some of those words are in Dad's book because he quotes a lot of figures in his books, and they inspired him to do what he was doing with the books and with showing that we are somebody and that we can do anything we want to do in this world. And damn
them. Ironically, after tonight, we will probably never see the 5 speeches of Fredrick Douglass, but that's just another story. Bill, former veteran, how do you feel about that? Because now, I'm going to get, you might need the little steel-toed boots too, because you were an officer and your oath was quite different from ours.
True. Yeah. And I have to, or had to, send my commission back, right, all the way back to Congress. There's a lot of fascinating sort of rituals associated with military service, and some of which are quite interesting and quite moving, and some of which are clearly just ostentatious and silly. But getting back to the actual question of patriotism in America, and with the exception of according to my research, with the exception of the Mexican American War, and I might be wrong about that, but to my knowledge, there have been Black people who have served on one side or the other, and sometimes both, in the case of the Civil War, in every one of America's armed conflicts. Right, we have been amongst the amongst those serving, and so
Excuse
with
his
that in
minor.
mind, unless and until we have a different reality, a different situation, we're always going to be divided, right? Not just externally divided, right? Us versus them, but us versus us. Uh, I've been in rooms where I've been the Black person, the Black guy, the whatever it is, right? But I've also been in the rooms where there's plenty of us, and there's still a lot of finger pointing and circular firing squad action and all that kind of foolishness and blue falconry. I'm sure that's I'm sure some of you know what that is. And what I can tell you is that there is a real problem, a deep, deep, deep problem internally, not just the external stuff, but internally, because W.B. Du Bois described it as dual consciousness. Pick a term, cognitive dissonance, pick one, whatever term you want to choose. Because there is a part of every human that wants to feel at home someplace, right? And if you've never lived any other place, you want to feel at home here. You want to attach to this place. You want to believe that this is a place where you should and can thrive, and where you should and can fight to defend it because it's your home, right? And I'm thinking of a poem that a friend of mine wrote that says, "This is not my home," right? And there's a whole line in there about African Americans as African American, like a dog cat being thin fat, or a free man bound in slavery, right? There's a whole bunch of things that go on inside of every Black person because there's that natural pull. I mean, if you're born someplace, you live someplace and die in that same place, and you never feel at home, of course you're never going to feel whole, right? I'm sure Dr. Casey has a bunch of stuff about why it is that there's so much emptiness and why people are desperately trying to fill it with everything from sex and drugs and keeping up with the Kardashians and whatever the hell else that people numb themselves with. Once again, as a young officer, at first I tried to sort of overachieve, right? That was my first approach. Well, I'll just be the best at everything, and that'll show them, right? That was, I'll make sure I get all, perfect evaluations. That'll
especially that Ranger tab. Yeah, that Ranger tab makes me the baddest mother. Yeah, right. I know that. Go ahead.
Yep. But it's not the disease, but it sure as hell was a symptom. So yeah, Dr. Casey, how do people fill that hole?
Well, a lot of the hole being there is the void, from what I believe, comes from you know how you get hurt and you get traumatized and you start putting stuff on top of other stuff and you just keep putting on defense mechanisms until eventually you're not even who you were um, as a child or in the essence of your innocence. So when you are no longer you and the trauma begins to be like a breaking point. So I was watching Dr. Drew a couple of years ago, and Frankie Lyons, Keisha Cole mama, was on there. And during the episode, he was telling her that when you start doing drugs or experience any type of trauma, that trauma leaves you stifled and stagnant in that same place for as long as you don't address it. So a lot of times people be avoiding with the Christian denial that we always talk about. They avoid issues. So when you avoid the issues, you're kind of leaving that space void because you can't mature in that area. So with when it comes to men, one of the reasons why I believe they say that men mature slower than women is because men are taught to suppress their emotions. So they are not processing the same type of growth that women do. And then women are taught to overly be emotional. It's okay because you're a woman. You can just cry and be all extra as much as you want. Just be as dramatic as you want to. So, but even that creates a void because now there is no balance. They don't know how to deal with their inner energy. We all, everybody on this form right now has masculine and feminine energy. When you don't learn how to understand or operate that, then it creates the void. So the void comes from
Dr.
all of
Casey, Dr. Casey, I done told you before, I've been in a joint. I cannot have feminine feelings. That
it's
does not
not
that does not compute in that environment.
it is not feminine feelings, not the type of feminine that you used to, that flamboyant feminine energy
We got
from
a
men.
name for them. We got a name for them. With the yeah, we got
So,
a name.
but it's a different type of. But that's the problem. That mindset, even though when you're in prison, you have to have that mindset in a sense. That is the issue that plagues, especially the Black community, because we believe that one, women believe that you can't be tough. You're too manly if you're kind of strong or independent, and then men believe that if you show any type of emotion, any type of sensitivity or vulnerability,
You
that it
soft.
makes you weak.
You soft.
But there is an amount of vulnerability and sensitivity and softness that really makes you harder than anybody else on the fucking planet.
Yeah, you realize that later.
See, but those things is we creates the void. The void comes from all of the things that I just said. The trauma that stifles your growth, the inability to feel the pain from the trauma. It don't even have to be a bad event. It could be having a baby. That's traumatizing. It could be trauma is the change of events that causes stress. Having a child can be stressful. Um,
Watching
losing
you
your
have a
virginity,
child can be stressful
but
also.
all of but
It's-
but
it's-
if you're not allowed to feel the sensitivity of watching your wife, baby mother, or whoever other have a child and express that tearful joy, that compassionate embrace with your child, that skin to skin time. We think that only babies need it, but as an adult,
Man,
we
man,
need
I
that
almost
talk.
fainted. I almost fainted. I've never seen anything like that.
But
I'm telling you, that was terrible. I had been up all night with her. Well, we went to the room, and then nurse was standing outside, say if you need anything. Man, by then I had been up for 10 hours. Man, I was just like, we're in the room, me and her, and all of a sudden I see all this stuff, man, and I'm like, I'm waiting for the nurse, and they're dealing with me, because I was just like, man, this was unbelievable. I mean, it was the most overwhelming. And we had gone to classes. We had done everything to get ready for
new
this.
classes don't do nothing but they gonna make
No,
you think that it's gonna be different than what it actually is. They just geek
I
you up. It's
went,
like
I
the
did
hype.
everything,
That's the
man. But
hype.
I tell you, when that moment come, I'm telling you, it was really something to be right up there.
See,
Oh,
but experiencing that will change your life forever. Now, if you
Yep.
process the emotion behind that,
yeah,
it'll make you a more compassionate, well-rounded a person, especially
yeah.
towards women, because you see
Boy,
what the like you see that vagina
woo,
spread thin,
good
and
Lord.
a whole person.
Human being.
Listen, women are like spaceships. We literally birth an alien onto this planet. Like the Fly, that movie, The Fly, it tripped me out when I was little, but it really makes a lot of sense. It is accurate. It's too much. But so that's what creates the void. But that's also those things also create the inner warfare that we see within people that causes other people to hate people because I haven't dealt with me. So if you're dealing with you, or if you got some issues too, then I'm gonna make you feel bad, because making you feel bad make me feel less bad about my shit, because your shit look real, you know what I'm saying, when it's plastered. But if everybody is not dealing with their stuff, they're not facing their own self. Trauma is self. Experience itself. So when you face your experiences and you deal with the things that you have encountered, good, bad, or indifferent, it matures you. That's where you get your lessons from. That's where you get the insight, the knowledge, the wisdom. That's how you get it. So yeah, that is the barrier between the reality of where we should be and where we are. And because history specifically is very littered with lies, it's hard for people to really accept some things, and then other things is just difficult to accept. So
Uh,
yeah. But ask me the question about the war and how I feel about that.
well, I'm going to kind of delve into that for a minute because Bill mentioned something, and it was probably also a part of your expectations when you were in the army, and that was coming home. Okay, in 1969, I was supposed to come home from Vietnam, but if you recall, in 1969, Newark was on fire.
Yep.
I had nowhere to come home to. Race relations in this country were at an all-time low, and this was before they started showing what happened on the news every night. So a lot of us as black soldiers felt that we were much safer being where we were at rather than come back to America because we had no homes to come back to. I think that made us our trauma much different and much more horrific, knowing that you don't know where your family might be, things that were familiar to you before you went to war were not familiar anymore. Most of us thought, hey, we're coming home, get that brand new car, get our GI Bill, get us a new house. Shit, there wasn't a house within 10 blocks of where I used to live when I came home. So things were a little bit different, but yet and still, do you is it worse not having a home to come back to or having a home that doesn't recognize you, as Fredrick Douglas said, as a full man? Bill, well, any one of you can take that.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of broken people, right? The difference is that there was a systematic approach to the breaking of Black people, right?
Mhm.
People get broken all the time in America. The
Very
difference
purposely
is,
done too.
right, the difference is there was a machine built, right? And they practiced the machine that broke us for a few hundred years. So they had it pretty close to perfect. And then someone said, you got to take that machine apart. And they said, okay, sure, we're going to take the machine apart. Okay, we're doing it. And what they did was they moved a couple of things around and then threw a tarp over it and then kind of, use the back entrance to feed us into the machine instead of just walking us into the front like they did 150 years ago. It was more like not even on the low exactly, because that'd be an exaggeration. It just wasn't blatantly blatant. It was just subtly blatant. So you could get broken all kinds of different ways in America. But the difference is, if you're a Black person, the way they're going to break you has been very well established in practice. That's the difference, right? I mean, we all watch what happens to, even rich, famous people, right? I mean, we watched what happened to Heath Ledger. We watched what happened. There's lots of like rich, successful people that we think must have wonderful lives who are very, very desperately, deeply broken. But for us, like I said, it's not happenstance. It's not luck of the draw. It's not, you got bad news from your doctor. Well, sometimes we got that too, but it's an actual completely
I'm eating
established.
chitlins and hog maws. What am I supposed to expect from my doctor?
Well, yes, right. That is, I mean, you are quite literally eating the parts of the animal that other people quite literally threw away. So, yes, it's not exactly health food. You are correct about that, James. So, like I said, to sort of conclude, so when the breaking, right, the almost inevitable breaking of so many Black people, it is not only expected, but it's planned. And when you somehow aren't broken, right? That's the thing that there's the right. That's the dog bites. I mean, the man bites dog, right? That's the what you're healthy and whole, and you have a really good sense of who you are, and you're not like toxically turned against yourself, and you don't feel any sort of self-hatred. You sure you don't feel not even a little self-hatred? No. Well, I'll be damned, something wrong. I mean, that's the difference, right? If you're a whole, healthy, completely fully formed adult person and you're Black, something did not go according to plan. That's the difference.
That's crazy.
Dr. Casey, Mr. Scott?
Well, I wanted to just quickly, since you read something from Fredrick Douglass, I want to read this. It's a quick quote here from a person that I admire. And basically it says, when the missionaries came to Africa, they had the Bible and we had the land. They said, let us pray. We closed our eyes. And when we opened them, we had the Bibles and they had the land.
It's funny that you say that, Mr. Scott,
Yeah,
because
me
I
too.
remember when we was doing our religion talk, you was gung ho for the same stuff that you speaking against right there. Now I know I ain't tripping.
Gung ho, I object to that. I mean, religion is a complicated, the ethos and all of those things. It's a very complicated situation. I mean,
not based on that quote you just read. We just talk about this quote right here that you just read right there.
Oh, okay.
Based on that quote, religion is not that complicated. It's a trickery. It's manipulation. It's that stuff that what's his name? The magician. Now you
David
see it,
Copperfield.
Now you see it, now you don't. Yeah.
Abracadabra. I told you that magic Jesus wand will make you forget.
Well, maybe I should ask Doubting Thomas.
Hey, Thomas ain't stuck his hand in no man's body that wasn't technically a man if it wasn't with no sperm, because you gotta, what your sperm creates? The head of the sperm is your brain. Not your brain on drugs, not that egg frying in the skillet that that they tried to convince you of. Your spine is the tail fin of that sperm. That is what your body is made out of. Right now, you go look it up. Your nerves come from the tail end of that sperm that created your spine, that the bone form around to that creates the hard body, the bone. That's your nerves. All
basic anatomy.
So if you're like, I got scoliosis, that means my daddy's sperm was stuck. It was still wiggling when it was going in. And then
maybe you went down too far. Maybe you did something.
No.
I got scoliosis too, but that's
your spine is your sperm. It's the sperm of your daddy. Like, this is not no BS. This is for real. Literally. So technically, whenever a baby has a spine issue or a nervous problem, it is something that happened within the chemical combustion of that sperm and that egg that did not allow that baby to properly develop. I have a brother that had a spine problem. I have a niece that has a spine problem, and that is the sperm. I mean, so in order for Jesus to be a human, somebody nutted in Mary. I'm just gonna be honest.
But now that's another religious
Topic. I'm
topic.
sorry.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
My bad.
Yeah.
I do see that we have Brother Williams and Brother Quran both in the queue. So I'm going to bring Brother Williams in. Brother Williams, did you happen to read that quotation that I put up there from Frederick Douglass?
Yes, I did. I got to get back focused because Dr. Casey had me laughing here. I was
I'm just being honest.
uh,
So when I think of that quote, though, I mean, the thing about that is, I would agree that there's a lot of obvious similarities in modern times in regards to that. Obviously, as we know, the what we lost as a result of segregation in terms of our unity, in terms of our recognition, in terms of our powers as African people. And I even want to go back to something I think I heard Brother Bill speak on in regards to I forgot how you put it there. I was just listening in the background. Um, I apologize. I don't remember how you worded it, but
Yeah, to shorten it up completely, if you are somehow unbroken as a black person
yeah,
in
that's a good
America,
word.
something somehow went wrong because the plan
Right,
was for
right.
some part of you to be deficient, right?
So, so what I was thinking about when you said that, and knowing some black people that I've encountered that say, "Well, ain't nothing wrong with me. I'm not broken." And when what I see, the reflection of what I see is a person that operates as an individual that does not carry their identity. They have basically accepted and bought into the American dream and has bought into the individualism that just separated themselves from the condition of our people per their perception. And so again, the perception is that you can climb that ladder, you can fight the fight and not have to have what I refer to as dual identities. And you have a lot of our people that are attempting to pursue the American dream coming from that perspective, whereas the rest of us either identify with the fact that we sick and we dysfunctional, or we are battling with that dysfunctional through some form of victimization. All of it is wrong. Going back to again what Bill said, all of we all have problems.
Mm.
It's just whether or not we recognize that we have a problem, and it's whether we realize that we need to fight to come up out of the condition of that, and we up for that fight. Because a lot of people have given in, and they just rather fight the fight of the individual. And I feel like that's kind of what's going on with that.
Brother Quran, welcome to the show. Do you have any comments that you'd like to make before we break off into something else here?
I do. I think it's important to note um, what the U.S. is responsible for on a global level. A lot of times, we often hear as Americans or Africans in America get tunnel vision uh, as far as the oppression um, and making it our thing here. When I see brothers and sisters all day, all I hear about is Ukraine and this and all this going on overseas. But it's important to take a look at our doings globally as far as when it comes to imperialism and what we're responsible for on a global scale when it comes to just humanity in general. And so a lot of the times, well, I like to say CNN is not your friends. Fox can kick rocks and, NBC let me be because they we have way too much trust in how we digest this information. Um, and so with the patriotism thing, I like some brother War said when it comes into the myths of the party and that we are physically trying to take down America. I think that's a lot of times when people get into revolutionary terms, they think about this cataclysmic thing of, us trying to take the country down, you know, literally. But it's okay to love the country for the people that's in it, for us, for looking at each other. You know what I mean? But you cannot buy into the system and buy into the lies that we're constantly fed on a daily basis. Um, your family was born in a certain spot, your community that you grew up in, here, um, they should have some relevance and some importance to you. But you can't just be out here cooning behind the red, white, and blue because it broke you off a couple dividends or made you gave you the illusion of inclusion.
See, there's that word again, and I hate that guys. That word inclusion. You know,
Hmm.
it's a word that just kind of turns my stomach. But I want to get back to success and materialism because coming back home as a hot-headed black man from Vietnam, I thought I was very successful. I robbed banks for a living. I worked for the organized crime, and I was married to a white woman. What
Damn.
more? I mean, come on now. Hey, I hit the goddamn lottery. Come on. I mean, so,
Won't he do it?
so, so now, wait a minute. Now, hold it. Now, all of that was good until the feds started talking about taking shit away, confiscating shit, forfeiting shit. Then all of a sudden, I found out that I was just another nigger in America. Okay. It did, all the money that I had paid those lawyers,
Can I ask you a question?
yeah, go ahead.
Did you think marrying a white woman made you different?
No, no, no. It did. As a matter of fact, the woman that I married before I married her, I had some men come by in a little black limousine and try to set certain standards for me in order for me to do this because, as I said, I had already been through 3 tours of Vietnam. I had already been through the penitentiary twice. So my fear, I had no fear factor. You couldn't do nothing to me that I couldn't do to you. But what it did do, it gave me a certain status within the community, especially the black community, because having a Cadillac and having a white woman at the same time was almost unheard of back in those days, which is gives you that false sense of pride and that false sense of comfortability. Are we still stuck in that type of perception, Brother Williams?
I don't think we're stuck in it from the way you did in terms of looking at it as a badge of honor to have a white woman. I think now, in terms of people having a white woman, it has to do with attempting to escape their identity or thinking they can escape oppression as it applies to who they are and what they are and where they came from. And I think people call themselves trying to be born into a privilege uh, through their connecting with that particular type of situation. Whereas I think with you may have looked at it as a status symbol catch. Whereas now, honestly, I seem to think that a lot of men are running from the strength that they find within black women. So whereas they can get with a white woman, and this is just my speculation. Let me just say that right now. It can get with a white woman, and it appears as though half of the time she'll be very submissive and very um, allowing of him to operate like he want to operate simply because he's black, and will even sympathize sometimes with what he has went through as a black man. But what happens with that is that it gives him a pass in terms of actually struggling for being black. It's like, look, that was the past. Let's try to forget it. Let's try to move forward. So it's like really trying to get him to escape his identity and let it go as if that was something that happened back then. Whereas when he lost his attraction to the sister, it has to do with the fact that you in a situation where you being pinned against your equal. And now we got to struggle and fight together. And I expect and demand a certain type of respect, or a certain type of strength, or a certain type of courage from you. So it's almost a sense of laziness, or it's a sense of not wanting to fight that fight that drove him to the white woman. Now I'm talking about the lower and middle class. I'm not talking about what happens to the upper class, to where they basically sick a white woman on you in order to pull you and extract you from ever being able to have a presence in the black community, and seeing to it that they can have something on you to make you think again about trying to step in a position of helping black folks. So I'm not talking about it from that position. I'm talking about it from what I see people going through psychologically to make them go out and actively choose to be with a white woman. I think it has a lot to do with escapism, and again, to me, attempting to live a life of an individual from that standpoint. But you know, I think that's part of the sickness that we started on earlier, that goes into it. Not per se, not to say that everybody that dated a white woman has that problem. The point I'm getting at is, if we're talking about it from the stance of looking at that as being my choice of a mate or a woman, simply because she's white, this is what I am seeking, then you're talking about somebody that is running from their identity.
Yeah, I feel like it could almost be, towards the other end of the scale. If we're talking about 2022, you see the brother with the white woman in the grocery store, and and maybe you're a sister or brother walking through, and you see them. It's kind of like a stare, like, oh, you don't see me right now, almost. You know what I mean? Whereas, what you're talking about, being the badge of honor, I just don't think the climate is the same as far as it goes, especially with the younger people. Um, you know, you might just get roasted, because we got Twitter now, and someone might send you a Dr. Umar meme or something. You know what I mean? Like, just the culture is kind of shifted in that sense of having a prized white woman, so to speak. I feel like.
Well, Dr. Casey, and I know this is probably going to really rub you the wrong way, but this is the way it was. Uh, I always had a black woman to creep with.
I mean, what I feel about that. Black women will always love black men, and we will do whatever we can to go to bat for them. So, they just probably thought that you was just, confused. Because if you married to a white woman, but you still creeping with a sister, then that woman that you married to is kind of like the president of the United States, just somebody to hold the place.
Mr. Scott, come on now. You from our generation, well, almost, but come
Well,
on now.
My generation, I don't have to even worry too much about that. I mean, the girls I talk to now, two girls I talk to, too late, they want to take me to church on Sunday. I'm like, wait a minute. So I guess that's the new thing that I'm in at the stage of my life. Um, but then I heard Wonder Brothers talk about Dr. Umar. And I was just wondering, I've been watching the brother for a few years for a couple of reasons. Entertainment, I hear some good things, and I just wanted to ask one of you two brothers what you think of the brother. If you're willing to share that.
Let me start off with that one. And not for us to change the subject matter. I'm gonna say that what he puts out in terms of black psychology, especially as it applies to child black psychology, I completely respect and gain much knowledge from him. Like with anybody else, I do my best not to get caught up in the personality. So I'm not going to really speak on his personality. I do love his boldness. I love the strength that he projects, regardless of what I agree with everything that comes with that, the fact is, I when we have our people that are putting out relevant information in terms of making sure you do not allow yourself to be trapped in the vicious cycle of what happens within the public school system, in terms of like what he puts out in regards to them attempting to get you to put your children on drugs, the Ritalin, and the stuff that suppresses their active behavior, as well as recognizing that the whole point is that they're pushing our black children towards special education
Yeah.
and towards not achieving. There's you can't dispute what he's saying. Now again, a lot of times, because you're talking about someone that is somewhat combative from a personal perspective in terms of other people that may be also operating in that same arena, to me that goes to that entertainment factor that you're talking about. And I think that just goes with the territory when you get, you know, get a large listening audience on YouTube, and then you have other people that kind of come in and someone's going to make a comparison, and then and now you're dealing with ego check. So that aspect you stay away from. Otherwise, you'll find yourself caught up in drama TV, whether someone's giving you relevant information or not. But I just want to stick to what he has to say with child psychology. I
Yeah.
don't think nobody's perfect. I don't think none of us, we all have our individual character flaws. But look past, to me, I work to look past things like that within anybody that I listen to. But there's plenty of information that he puts out that is very relevant, that is very knowledgeable, that is very sound, that we need to touch on and we need to build on, and just move with that. I don't think we should put ourselves behind anyone as a quote unquote black leader, because
Right.
to me, within the Panther Party, our mentality is we need to teach leadership across the board. And that kind of goes right back to what I was saying about to James in regards to a person picking a white woman over a strong sister. The strong sister is going to demand, or should demand, that you stand up, that you hold yourself accountable as a black man, and that you keep fighting that fight through the struggle. Whereas the white woman more than likely will sympathize with his pain, sympathize with his victimization, and cater to that and make him feel good about weeping about the struggle that he went through and his people went through. And to me, that's a form of pacification.
Mhm.
And that's what we don't need.
It's almost like giving us holidays that we don't need,
There you
just
go.
to just I'm gonna coach you over. I'm gonna make you feel good on the outside by doing nothing for your inside.
And I feel like going back to Dr. Umar, um, it is entertainment at the end of the day, but I feel like it's important for people with a platform to make cultural shifts, right? Um, and so even just going back into sending the Umar meme, you know what I mean? Like just the idea behind it, it could have more of an impact than necessarily, his day in, day out politics of it. So I do feel like it's important to shift the culture to a conscious space where we are having some of these conversations and we are thinking about these things. You know what I mean? Like memes are the language of today. So it's important to have, um, you know, Pan African talks and things like this are some of the subject matter. Um, Something that the youth can kind of just bounce around. I feel like it's important to take back the culture because if we don't supply it, then it's gonna come. The influence is gonna come from somewhere.
Brother Quran, the average voting age in this country is between 45 and 60.
Hmm.
How many 60-year-olds know what a meme from Umar means?
Hey, maybe a few.
I mean, I'm 75, but I'm on this stuff every day, so
Hmm.
I may know if you send me one, and then I might send you a nasty one back. But that's a different story.
Yeah.
But but I'm saying you also have to be conscious of the audience that you're trying to reach. Like
Hmm.
like like me with this show, I'm not necessarily pinpointing a particular demographic. But I feel that it's my obligation to put something out there for people to think about.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people my age might not want to do this, might not have the energy to do this, but yet we are still the ones that go to the polls. And like I say, vote in these people that, as Mr. Scott so readily pointed out, that have one foot on the banana peel and the other in the grave. But we still keep voting them in because that's the thing that we have done all of this time.
Mhm.
So, Bill, I want to kind of go to you here. When you read Fredrick Douglas from 1847, you look at what's happening within our neighborhoods as far as education, as far as supplying the basic needs of our community. How far are we away from the age in which I grew up?
Well, in some ways, things have moved slightly forward, in some ways dramatically forward, in some ways somewhat backwards. So it depends on which thing you're talking about. Our community is less unified than it was when you were a small boy. There is more raw capital within our community, but it is directed perhaps worse than it was at that time. There are fewer Black-owned insurance companies. There are fewer Black-owned cab companies than there were then. Fewer Black-owned clothing companies than there were then. I mean, there's a lot of depressing stuff I could tell you about that if you wanted to hear that. Educational attainment amongst Black women is up from that era. Educational attainment amongst Black men compared to that era is shockingly close to the same. Very little has happened. A little bit has happened, but not as much as you would think in that amount of time. I mean, you started school 69 years ago. Is that about right, James?
That's about 1953.
Okay, so you started school in 1953. So in 1953, so the good news, bad news for Black people index, I guess, is what we're talking about. So the good news index is that voter registration is up, but not as much as you would think it would be if you like voter registration. But I mean, it's an indicator of other things. Like I use it for whatever, but it tells you a little bit about both engagement and also a certain sense of confidence, right? Because there are people who couldn't register for vote in 1953. Like, even if you wanted to, even if you literally were willing to risk your life to do it, and you would be doing that in lots of parts of America. And as I said, educational attainment kind of stagnant for Black men, up significantly for Black women. In terms of gainful employment, right? Meaning not just you have a job, because people talk about, hey, look, unemployment's down, but how many of those jobs are $9 an hour jobs? Or how many of those jobs are one person who's working two part-time jobs, neither of which provide them with benefits, right? Because they don't want to give you enough hours for you to get benefits. So you work 27 hours at one job and 31 at another job, just tantalizingly close to full-time, but not quite. Yes. Oh, curses, spoiled again. But in terms of gainful employment, meaning that the place where you work pays enough to not only satisfy all of your basic needs, but also you can actually put away for your retirement, send your children to college, blah, blah, blah. Amongst Black women, up significantly. Amongst Black men, basically stagnant once again. And part of that's due to manufacturing and other lower skilled jobs that used to pay fairly well have either completely left America, or they now are no longer pay well compared to the cost of living, right? So some of these things pay almost what they, like if you were the equivalent of like a key punch operator, right? You operate you're a, not quite a machinist, but you're like a machinist helper, right? It used to be that by itself, no one person working in a factory helping a person run like a key punch, paid enough to buy a house and a car, right? Not so much anymore. Even though the pay rate is maybe slightly above it. Well, it's above what it was in 1953, but it hasn't kept up with inflation. Good news, bad news. Okay, percentage of home ownership is slightly down amongst Black Americans from where it was in 1953. Well, I should say slightly down. In certain areas, it's slightly down. In some areas, it's about the same. In some areas, it's up a little bit. But in cities like Detroit and Chicago, it's slightly down. In the South, it's up, right? So I should be clear. Like in Atlanta in 1953, we're above that number, or the Atlanta area, we're above that number amongst Black Americans in terms of home ownership. Let's see what else has changed since 1953. There were zero. When I say zero, there was one. Well, there was one brigadier general in the whole army, and Air Corps actually, to be perfectly honest, who was a Black American, right? And that was Benjamin O. Davis. We now have 7 2-star and above Black officers, 2 who are Black women, 5 who are Black men. If that tells you anything, and at least it tells you in that career path that you're getting to the upper levels of management, which was not a thing, but or at least not very much a thing in the time before. There were no Black admirals in 1953, as you might well imagine. I think the highest ranking Black flagship officer in those days was probably a captain in the Navy. We now have three Black vice admirals and several Black rear admirals. Millionaires. Well, there are several Black millionaires, but once again, that money is very siloed off. Like it doesn't connect to the Black community. Mm-hmm. And there was like 2 in those days, but once again, $1 million isn't what it used to be. So I don't know what the answer is. Yes to all, right? Things are better and things are worse.
Mr. Scott, do you share that opinion? You graduated high school when?
I graduated high school. Let me think. We were state champions football, 1967.
Good job slipping that in. Too.
Okay. 1967.
Yeah, back in those, coming up.
The year of the Detroit riots, the summer of '67. I didn't even know that there were Black people in Minnesota in 1967.
Oh yeah, there was a big riot, 1968 on Plymouth Avenue, North Minneapolis, all torn down to never come back.
Right.
I mean, everything that Bill has said is really a progression. As back then, my parents to get a house, everything was redlined here in Minneapolis. We were all pushed into one area, pushed into another area. We lived in a terrible old rental house. Terrible house. I had to go outside and get gas to pour it into the stove and light the stove. I'm like 5 or 6 years old. I'd never let a kid do that. I mean, I would, but that's how it was. That's how it was then. We get out of that old house, and we always were renting until we finally got a house in South Minneapolis that I still owned in this city. And my mom and dad split up, and so Mom was paying this lady $80 a month for this house. And so one day I get a call from Boston. This guy says, well, this is my mother's house, and this contract for deed was up 5 years ago. You got to give me $12,000. You got to get out by the end of the month. I'm like, what? I mean, we've been paying the lady all this damn time. Well, yeah, but you didn't pay the whole book. You didn't pay the balloon, so you got to get out. Unfortunately, I had just started working. I was able to get a little mortgage and pay it off and help her. And we still own that house today. But we're talking, she's paying $90 a month then. Okay. You look at how the economics has really changed everything for us. I could get apartments when I started out of school, $150 a month, $150 down. I was playing in bands where I made more money than I was making. I had a master's degree. Nowadays, I mean, you talk about to get in apartments, to get in, you talk about the type of money that you need to have to do these things. And the jobs are not keeping up with what you have to pay for your overhead, your food, your clothing, your cars, your transportation. If you don't live in a good city with public transportation, Yeah. So I mean, it's just like the economy browbeats us too. The economy keeps their foot on your neck. It keeps you down. You can't afford to do this, so you got to work 2, 3 jobs. And as you were saying, Bill, they won't give you so much time where you can't get benefits. You can't get health care. You can't get so. I see the progression. Are we doing better now? I guess people that have worked 50 years, they're probably doing better. But people getting started now, I think it's a tough, and I think it's a contributing thing to all this strife we're having, all this frustration that we're having, all this ineptitude with the police. I mean, this Amir Locke thing up here has just made me sick. How in the world can they go in there, kill
Yeah.
this boy? Not he's not even the one on the warrant. They don't know who's in there. They haven't done their diligence. And so all these things need to be unraveled and brought to the surface, or I don't see how we're going to continue, how we're going to progress. I mean, it's the economy thing is really tough. When I see my kids go through to get, they're trying to get a house and trying to get started. It's just not easy.
It's a good point you brought up because I talk about that a lot with some of the younger comrades because we do lose a lot of steam with organizing due to the nature of people having to work 24/7, and that's kind of the name of the game, right? Like keep you in the office so we can keep you politically uncharged. um so I do applaud this younger generation for being as politically charged as they are given the current condition of uh capitalism, right? So we got these kids working all these jobs. We got the youth getting more degrees than they've ever gotten in history, um really grinding it out around the clock and still find time uh and enough strength to still organize in mass and get and take it to the streets. And so I feel like it says something about just the political climate in general, um and the shape that the youth are in. Not necessarily saying that it's a leg up or anything on the 60s, but it's nice to see you know that the ball hasn't been completely dropped in that sense.
Dr. Casey, you mentioned earlier in the show that you were reading books on the Vatican and some of the history of the Vatican. Um, have you read much about the history of the Vatican in the 60s and 70s and the Vatican's position on interracial marriage, uh, integration, and so forth? I believe that was Pope John Paul I want to say the ninth. No, I think it was the fourth. But have you gotten into any of that history of the Vatican yet?
I actually just ordered and received the books.
Oh, okay.
I have 4 of them. I didn't bring them downstairs. They're sitting up on my table upstairs. And some of them are picture books. Some of them are informational. I have to go through them all. I ordered actually a few books. Um, that you all may be interested in hearing about. Um, but I hadn't read them just yet.
Uh, Brother Williams, I'm sure you might be a little bit more familiar, especially since a lot of what the Vatican was saying at that particular time had to do with uh, the formation of the Black Panther Party, the goals of the Black Panther Party, as well as other Black organizations that were quote unquote supposedly radical at the time. Do you remember those conflicts between our community and organized religion as far as Catholicism and some of the major religions?
Actually, I have not done much research as it applies to Catholicism within that, But I mean, what I can tell you though is that that just really goes back to the what was being feared by the black community at that point in time, especially. And keep in mind, this even goes back to me, what you had when you dealt with people like Robert F. Williams, to where you had the deacons of self-defense, to where the black churches were recognizing that they need to arm themselves and take a stand and be more proactive within their congregation as it has to do with self-defense. And I do know that that did not sit well with the white churches, as well as obviously the white establishment from that standpoint, period. And then the mentality that was going along with that was fueling the black church congregation through that Pacific era and that time period to be more active in terms of standing up for your rights and connecting that with religion. And by connecting that with religion, what you're doing at this point in time is you're escaping some of that aspect of the religion that ties you to the inferiority part of it, and you're actually taking more of a Nat Turner approach. And so that did not sit well with the Vatican, obviously, or the white church, period. And so they wanted to fight against anything that would create a condition to where, in their mind, you were choosing not to quote unquote turn the other cheek. So that I do realize was taking place. And to me, kind of going back to what you was asking earlier with the difference in the generations, as well as like when what Bill was speaking on about now versus then and what's good and what isn't, to me it just still goes into knowing our struggle. I feel the more diluted we become as a community, as a people, and the more we chase individualism, we forget what our struggle is as a people. We lose the connection that we should have to how we actually go about fighting. And so when we don't know our struggle, when we lose sight of what our struggle is, which is recognizing that as a people, as a collective, we must come together in order to form real power, to have a real power base. That even goes back to what we was talking about the difference between having more infrastructure within the black community when there was segregation versus what we have now. And we can see that that went down. And from that same standpoint, like what Bill was saying in regards to the education within the black males, this went down as a result of the fact that when you had segregation, we had to operate, on a higher level collectively. But now that we dealt with assimilation, what you had at this point now is we were able to venture out and disperse. And as a result of that, education didn't necessarily hold the same weight to the black male as it did in the past. Because whereas we had to hold it together through that, now it's not so much the case. And the black woman has taken more of a front role, even within the struggle. Right now, within the Panther Party, we see more women, black women, stepping up than we do see black men. And to me, that even feeds right into what we was talking about the integration piece, because of where do we define our struggle? What is our struggle? As we deal with this dysfunctional individual that doesn't know thyself, that doesn't know how to reach back and find who they are, and we don't have a rites of patches within the black community, we lose our connection to what it is that we need to grab onto to collectively come together in the fight, which goes into, to me, it goes into a lot of the what I call the social frustration and that you get with social media, and the fact that a lot of the youth are not able to deal with stress the way that we do when we connect ourselves as a unified family. But at the same time, going back to what Brother Quran said, we did they didn't drop the ball. I think part of the problem is that football that was tossed to them, we thought it was a football, but it became, by the time it landed in a hand, it became a medicine ball. And so we have to reconnect, to me, the different age factors, because the elders recognize what it means to have that family unit and that togetherness. The middle generation recognizes the different language, going back to the meme suggestion that was brought up, and then the youth know how to take this forward. So part of the dynamic that we continually deal with has to do with, again, recognizing that we're at war, which goes into knowing what the struggle is, which goes back to knowing how we are being used against each other, which is also something that was brought up earlier in regards to what Dr. Umar speaks on. He speaks heavily on African unity, heavily on us not allowing ourselves to be watered down, which is kind of why he comes off the way he does in regards to interracial relationships. He completely hates it. And he hates it for the fact of what it does to the destruction of the black family. And so you have to see it for what it is. And this is even someone like me. I'm not married to a white woman. I'm married to a Filipino. But I tell you in a heartbeat, don't do it. If you can at all costs avoid an interracial relationship, don't do it. Stay black. Stay pro-black.
Why?
I say that because too many of our people that get into interracial relationships get into it simply because they're running from their heritage. They're running from being black. They're running from the things that connect them to that. And speaking from a man, that sister's gonna remind you of that. That sister's gonna remind you of where you need to be in terms of your strength. So too many of our people that are involved in interracial relationships run from what they need to be doing as being strong black men. And that's what I see when I see interracial relationships. They run from that. When it's your white counterpart having to tell you to stand up, to me that's something wrong. If I have to hear that from my white wife telling me that I need to stand up, but at the same time pat me on my back for what we went through, it's daunting and confusing as hell.
That's
And I think that's
interesting.
the problem.
That's interesting because you just stated that you're in an interracial relationship, that you feel that way.
Well,
Yeah, but I'm a Panther. I'm not running from what my people need to be doing.
yeah.
And my
See,
whole thing is I recognize it.
What
that,
about the
that,
black
that, that
woman that goes with the white man?
but now, Brother Williams, I can relate to that because when I was in Milan, Michigan, and I was associated with a lot of Black Panthers, but at first it was very hard for me to make those inroads because I was married to a white woman.
Mhm.
And the question that was always posed to me is how can you be black and yet still be married to the oppressor? That's how
Right.
it was presented to me as a Panther.
hmm and that is still the sentiment as far as going to the European for the most part within the movement. I do know of some that are involved in white women, uh, especially from your generation, that was still very successful. And then we have a lot of our members that are from interracial um, parents, white
Right.
and black. In fact, our minister of information that I grew up with throughout the New Black Panther Party, Brother E, who's very prominent, very powerful within the movement. His mother is white, and he even went and y'all can go research this. He even went on the Donahue show back in the day and spoke about how he hates white people but loves his mother.
Yeah, yeah.
He said he hates white people but loves his mother. And that whole dynamic again caused him, because of having to deal with the identity. And he's a perfect example to use, because his father did not want him to get involved in being a Black Panther, but yet his white mother encouraged it. His white mother was the one that encouraged him to learn his history, to learn what it means to be a stand-up, strong Black man. whereas the father, what, ran from that. You see, and that's the same dynamic I'm talking about when I talk about the interracial relationship. It tends to be like that. Why did, as a black man, why did you choose to go to a white woman versus stick with fighting and fussing with your own? And why
I,
did that white woman then have to reel you back and tell you this shouldn't be why you with me?
so, Mr. Williams, I agree, and I have an additional perspective. I don't want to disagree because I
Okay.
think that, well, as a parent of a 13-year-old brown skinned young man, my biggest goal is to make sure that he doesn't resent black women. Because
Right.
I think that a lot of times, black males are ridiculed, they're talked down. It goes back to what we were saying about suppressing their feelings and emotions and vulnerabilities and all of that. And the way largely that black women talk to black men, it makes them reject their own, um, more than it's just running from. It's trying to find comfort in what they may feel like they didn't get at home. And I think it's really sad because I don't think that no a person outside of your race can love you as deeply as somebody that knows exactly everything that you've been through, and feel that same sense of struggle, but in a place that seeks to empower you and seeks to grow with you in most cases. Now, I've been on this Facebook group recently talking to some people, and a lot of black men don't feel like they are heard. They don't feel like that they are protected or valued, or that they can be um any type of emotion shown. And I believe that that's very, very sad, but that comes from not just society telling them they can't express emotions, but oftentimes mothers telling their sons that they ain't shit, or they like their daddy, or having that bitterness in them, and then it's projected on their children, and it makes not just black men, but children in general to resent their own, and they go and seek that validation outside.
Mr. Scott, we talked about the family, the mayor of St. Paul, and how the whole family has been involved in politics, and they have a very strong religious as well as family background. Uh,
You talking about his cousin?
no,
I'm gonna get you.
uh, but Mr. Scott, what do you think about is there a disconnect? Is there a focal point that we should be looking at? I mean, you've been married to the same woman for quite a few years. You're an example for a lot of black men. On having a long marriage as well as I mean, how many men in your generation are still married to the same woman?
Well, that's the whole dynamic of white, black. I mean, here in Minnesota, it's different. I mean, it's
Yep.
different from. I used to travel to places when I had a job. I'd go to Houston or Atlanta, and I'd say where I'm from. All the girls would say, "Oh yeah, you like white women," because they had put an article in the Jet magazine
Yep.
about interracial dating and things up here in Minnesota. So everywhere I went, that's what they would. Yeah, they'd kind of take me through the gauntlet with that. But no, I was married, luckily married, blessed until my wife passed away. I just tell you, it's been the hardest thing. I never thought I'd go through anything like this. I thought once my mother died, I said I'm never going to feel like this again. But little did I know. And now I have two granddaughters, and one of the granddaughters is a Hmong. Her mother is Hmong, and it gets back to the relationship thing. I mean, they stayed together maybe a year, and then they broke up. I mean, so they're not together. He has my granddaughter one week, she has him the other week. But the funny thing about her, if you look at her and you see her, she's a black girl. I mean, her hair is nappy. Her hair, I mean, she just looks like I mean, you just, there's no question about it. She, mother's mom, but I have
Black,
another granddaughter.
black men,
Maybe it's not nappy.
black
Maybe she
men,
just needs some oil, some grease on it.
But then
black,
I
black
just say,
men, black men have traveled all over the world, Mister Scott.
I realize
Especially
that.
through the military.
But then I have another granddaughter. I have another granddaughter, and her mother is white. And when I went to see that child the first time, I said, "This is a little white girl." I mean, her hair was a brown, straight little hair. I'm like, man, this girl. She looks. But as she got older, when she got one, two, three, her hair grew out real long, real curly, and now you see features in her that you didn't see as a baby. And for me as
that
a
melanin kicked
grandfather,
in.
I guess I always project, how are the kids going to live? How are they going to, I always say, well, I'd like to send my grandkids to a HBCU. I think of those things. I said, well, okay, I have a Hmong granddaughter and a Caucasian granddaughter. But I love my granddaughters. I mean, there's no question about that. I love my granddaughters. But I had always hoped they'd find somebody like their mother. I always hoped that they'd find somebody like Jackie, because my life with her, I knew we everything we did, it was organized, it was together, and I'd get pulled back by her, and it was just a great relationship. I wanted that for the boys. Now, is that to say they can't have that with someone of their own race? Boy, I think that the points that you make, Mr. Williams, are certainly strong. And I think that as we look as black people, continuing, that's why I do our books, to show what black people can do, to show who we are, that it is nothing that we can't do. And hopefully that inspires the kids at the same time that we're letting the rest of the world are reminding them. Because one of the things Dad said when he started his books, it's like the news, they're not doing us justice. The newspaper, the TV, they're not saying anything about us, the things that we do, what we've got going. And so that's I think if we don't do it, I mean, we can't have our hand out. We can't take our hat off and hand out. We have to go get it.
Absolutely. And I want to go off of that and say that, we don't deal in colors. We're not against white or per se. You know what I mean? We're against oppression. And so that goes into knowing yourself and knowing also what you're up against. And so a lot of these folks don't even know how they're being oppressed. They're getting their ass beat on a daily basis by, spending more than they save and being bombarded and targeted day in and day out because of who we are. And so it's important to educate ourselves and each other on what we're up against and what it looks like. And so in going with that, a major proponent of these things has been historically white male chauvinism, and the capitalist system, which is carried out through the state. And so we have to open our eyes to what we're up against, because if we don't know what we're up against, then it just sounds like we're against white people in general. We're just against, just for the sake of like, we're different colors. And it's an oversimplification, because you're just going to still get your butt beat down day in and day out.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's knowing the struggle. Know your struggle.
Go ahead, Brother Williams.
I was just gonna say, I'm just emphasizing that goes back to knowing your struggle. And what we're talking about is, when we talk about people finding a mate, or finding a companion in the first place, if you don't love yourself, and you're not able to have a proper reflection within yourself, your identity, then you tend to look outward for that. And subconsciously, that may be the attraction, like going back to what Dr. Casey said, that someone had that caused them to reach out. And so that goes right back into part of the fight that Brother Quran is talking about. We have to be able to, as a people, reconnect ourselves with our greatness, like Anthony is saying, and be able to move that forward. That's why, as the generations pass the baton to the younger generations, that baton needs to have that girth still attached to it. It needs to have that spinal cord that Dr. Casey talks about within the sperm. It needs to have all of these things attached to it, and and the youth taught how to handle this stuff, taught what to do with it, and therefore they won't be taken for granted, and therefore won't be rejected by the next generation. So we're dealing with certain levels of sickness that creep into our society as a result of some of the offsets with the removal of segregation, because our family unit did not stay intact in terms of our value system as we assimilated. So as a result, we all took off running from the gate as individuals, and we dispersed ourselves in terms of our mentality. And it kind of goes right back to when I first jumped in, y'all was talking about chitlins and using that as an example. Okay, the parts of the physical that no one wanted to eat. Let's think about that from a psychological standpoint now. So we're still psychologically eating chitlins and tricking ourselves into saying it's good. So we're gonna dump hot sauce on our mentality in order to be able to still digest this sickness that we're going through.
Right.
Everybody's carrying a bottle of hot sauce in their bag so that they can
Swag.
still eat them chitlins. And that's what's wrong with us. We got to stop coping with that stuff. But that's that sickness.
Hey, I wholeheartedly agree with you, Brother Williams, and I'm going to have to use
First
that.
of all,
But
can we have a polite round of applause for that beautifully executed metaphor?
Formation.
Bill, give us your final thoughts for the evening, man. Always good to have you join us on Monday.
Thank you. It is a pleasure, truly a pleasure. I'm familiar with everybody here except Brother Cron. It was a real pleasure, finally getting a chance. I've heard your name before, but finally there you are, and I can hear you, and I appreciate everything that you had to give. So I hope it's not the last time. So for those that follow me on Twitter, all throughout February of each year, I do, because I'm known mostly for my writing about sports, I do Black Football History Month. And I touch upon things that people may not know about Black football history, from William Henry Lewis, who not only was the first Black football player to be an All-American, Walter Camp All-American, he also was, at one point, the highest-ranking federal officer in America when he was Assistant Solicitor General in the Theodore Roosevelt administration. He was an amazing person, was involved in civil rights cases. Like I hear people say the civil rights era, and they're talking about, 54 to 68, right, or 69, as if the civil rights era didn't begin really in the 1600s, right? So when the first set of Africans who were brought here as captives, after 6 or 7 years, many of them were set free. People forget that not all of us, right. were chattel slavery forever, ever, and then our generation after generation. It took them a while to figure out that was the way to go. At first, you do 7 years or so. They'd give you what they call a freedom suit at the end of it, and maybe $1 or $2, which in 1670 something wasn't so bad. A couple of dollars you could buy yourself a nice set of tools. And then they were like, when we set them free, they go into business down the road from us, and now they're competing with us. Well, that might not be the way to go about it then. But that's for another show, Bill. But I do a whole tweet series. People like Brud Holland or John Mayo Inc. Williams So John Mayo Ink Williams fascinates me. He is truly a conundrum wrapped inside a riddle, stuffed inside a question mark. Was a brilliant individual, darn close to world-class athlete, was a teammate of Fritz Pollard at Dartmouth University, managed some of the biggest black acts in what they call race records, right? Ran his own record company for a few years, but several years, several years here in Chicago. But we talk about that whole like holding on to a part of the outsider version of looking at yourself, right? So this incredibly accomplished man who had all these, who was successful in so many different ways, never allowed himself to get close to any of the artists that he recorded or managed or promoted, at least in part because, well, he was college educated, right? He'd gone to Dartmouth, no less. And these people were, gut bucket blues singers. They were people who sometimes if they had a fourth or fifth grade education, that was saying something. And some of them had literally no education. Some of them had never seen the inside of a school in their lives. And, some of them had gold teeth and, were missing teeth and had stab wounds. And, all the stuff that you would imagine a 1920s, 30s blues artist might have going on in their lives. Maybe a little bit of syphilis, who knows? He always kept himself at arm's length from them, right? And he wrote about it. It's like, I would hear the way they spoke and what they were talking about and how they lived, and I never allowed myself to get close to them. And later in life, he realized he made a terrible mistake. Like he should have, gotten to know some of these people, but he always kept himself away. And when we talk about, how the black middle class drifted away, whatever, that's not a recent phenomenon. Like Pill Hill and all the other things, even when we still were redlined, we would find a way. You know what I mean? Like, maybe I have to be in the same neighborhood with you, but maybe not this part of the same neighborhood where you are. We always have been struggling against the outsider's eye in our own mind, right? Right? Like it's like having a spy live inside your own soul. It is this incredibly challenging thing. And I can't explain this to people unless they've been black. Like there's certain things I just can't explain to anyone else that we all incredibly implicitly understand, right? Why that little black girl doesn't want to play with the black dog because it's ugly. And all those things that like we will never be able to explain to anyone else because it's something we all implicitly understand. And so when we talk about the healing, and Dr. Casey has done said some really important and I think incredibly cogent things about like how until and Brother Williams, well, how we can't win until we have solid ground beneath us. And as long as this outsider's eye is in our own brain, seeing us and reporting right on us to us, spying on ourselves, even right, if you think of it that way, and judging us not even by our own standards. And so I write about these people, right, and the lives they led, and it reminds me of how much and how little has changed, as James brought up earlier, how much and how little has changed. I'm reminded of it because my journey with this starts literally like in the late 1880s, right, when the first black players get introduced to American tackle football in its early days. And even then, because of segregation, a bunch of stuff, like they aren't playing with white players, obviously. But then when some of these guys get to Ivy League schools like William Henry Lewis does, all of a sudden everything changes. So now these northern places that hold themselves up as, well, everything's a meritocracy and blah, blah, blah. And so he goes, some people have success even and succeed academically, succeed athletically, in fact, blow the doors off of things academically and athletically because, if you pass through as many filters as you have to be a black person at an Ivy League institution in the 1890s, I mean, like you're a superhero, right? To go through all the things you had to get through to get to that point. But despite that, all of them have that, like I said, have some version of that inner pulling in both directions, right? Once again, the double consciousness that Du Bois talked about. So in my tweet series, I talk about all these different and amazing stories. And some of these people go on have amazing lives, some of them not so amazing lives, but it all comes back to that whole
can you find a way to purify, to burn out, to return to that place where all of you is all of you, right? It's not divided, it's not chopped up, it's not refracted, it's not a kaleidoscope funhouse mirror of yourself. It's you again. And I'll be honest, I've been working on this for a while. I still haven't gotten to it, but I'm working, I'm clawing, and I'm fighting. I would like to get to that point, right? But that's my final thought. Like how far we have to go, and the more you know about how far you have to go, the more you realize, you've made some progress, but man, how much more you still have to go, right? The more I know, the more I realize how little I know.
Mr. Scott, your final thoughts for the evening.
Oh, just that I enjoyed, talking with the folks, and from an education standpoint, I think sharing ideas, sharing thoughts, as much of that stuff as we can do within our community, I think is always positive. In my last job, when I was a supervisor at Hennepin Child Protection, one of the most telling things that I had to go to a group and speak to a group of ladies at a church, and they would come and they would cook dinner for their kids, and they would just be there to talk. And when I told them I was a child protection person, oh boy, I thought they were just gonna. What they were able to do is tell me what it felt like to be on the other side of this. When people knock on your door, want to take your kids, they want to give you Ritalin. There was one lady in particular who got taken to court because she refused to give her kid the Ritalin because she said the kid was climbing up the walls with the Ritalin. And so I told her, I said, look, you've got to sit down and talk to your doctor, get the social worker and tell the doctor this is what's going on, and tell that doctor he'll be liable if this kid gets sick behind this. But the net of that meeting was, if the agency, I said, man, we need to do more of this, meeting with the people in the community, bring them together. So there's just one of me and there's 10 of them there. Okay, so they can get their points across. So I think we as Black people really need to continue to communicate. And this, for me, being cross, people in California, Chicago, Atlanta, and last time, I think I found out Dr. Casey's in the rap game. I would have never thought that. I didn't know.
You ain't even recognize my rhymes for tonight.
So you learn things as part of this. So yeah, I thank you guys for having me, and I enjoy talking with you.
Mr. Scott, I've been dropping rhymes all night, and you ain't acknowledged none of them. I've been rhyming and riddling the whole time.
Well, we can get into that subject sometime too, because I have some thoughts, very salient points I can make on that. So I'll save that for later.
For our later cipher.
Brother Quran, it's not often that you come and visit us, but we thank you for your contributions this evening. Why don't you give us your final thoughts for the night?
Thanks for having me on. I feel like it would be a disservice if I didn't note on the last day of Black History Month the protests at the Capitol. Today, 1969, the Panthers marched on the state capitol to protest the state taking their arms away. And so definitely a big moment in history, as well as the trial of Angela Davis was started in 1972 for murder. She had bought some weapons, which resulted in the death of a few Panthers and a judge, and she represented herself and ended up winning with the all-white jury. So all power to the people.
All right. Thank you so much, dear brother. Brother Williams.
All right. I'm gonna hit y'all with an acronym, and I'm gonna see if y'all pick it up before I announce it here. My biggest thing here is, once we detach ourselves from the consequences of oppression, in regards to the actions, separating that oppression from the actions and no longer held confined by the threat of never seeing freedom as a people, we will then become liberated towards true freedom. And as it applies to that, until that day of collective awakening, going back to talking about segregation, our only recourse will still remain being fortification on the consent of the king. Do y'all know that acronym? Bill, I know you got to know that. Fortification on the consent of the king.
Oh, yes. Okay, yes.
That is the state that we are in
Yeah, yes.
until we get our act together.
Yes.
Well, Dr. Casey, take us home.
Well, first and foremost, Mr. Carroll, spiritual human behavior. He just popped off, but spiritual human behavior for all the listeners will and can help you to unlock and uncover the deepest portal of yourself. Um, Aside from that, overall, before I go any further, I just want to say that at 3 hours ago, it's supposed to say that the House passed the lynching being a federal hate crime. Hopefully, that is signed and sealed and delivered. I mean, it has taken quite a long time.
Right,
But
right.
praise the Lord.
Well, Brother Williams, we still have Christmas ornaments out here, black men and trees.
Yeah, and
This
I
this is
dealt with an
California.
event. Yeah, I dealt with an event where a black man was hung. So yeah,
I just was scrolling. I know I'm supposed to be focused, but this was relevant. Uh so I wanted to mention that, but overall I think that the basis of everything is the foundation that is needed to be built on self-acceptance, which generates self-love and generates compassion. But the even more bigger thing is communication and information, which means we need to learn how to communicate amongst ourselves to each other about things that both bother us, and things that bring us joy. We complain a lot, but we don't communicate a lot. And I think that that is a huge problem within our community and culture as a whole and in general. And then just making sure that we are not only communicating but also gathering and passing along information. We don't know enough. And a lot of people get upset when you tell them that they're ignorant or unknowledgeable, but ignorance means that you don't have the information. And oftentimes you're ignorant because you don't seek to find information. You're okay with just saying whatever somebody said to you, and that's unacceptable. And until we begin to gather the information, understand the information, and accept it, we won't see the growth potential that we have as a collective. The information, once we get it, it makes our communication effort better. And the more we communicate, the stronger we become bonded and in unity together. Overall, communication is the biggest problem. Well, communication and comprehension, because I can tell you something, but if you don't comprehend what the hell I'm saying, I might as well just not even say nothing in the first place. So, I hope that people walk away from this particular show knowing what your sperm produces in another person as a man. And when you gather that sperm as a woman, you need to know who that sperm is coming from, because if they on drugs or if they got something going on, then that will alter the chemical combustion of that sperm and how that sperm will connect with your egg. Aside from that, I hope that you understand the cultural differences amongst Black people. We got cultural differences amongst ourselves that we
yeah,
don't understand or comprehend. But also, they discuss it not being black or white. We're literally all bleeding the same blood. We don't have any real differences other than the differences that people have told us that we're supposed to have. I
Right.
literally just found out, like, in the last 20 minutes, that I am literally connected to a tribe of Native Americans. And so but that's information. If you go look up information, I know I like being on my phone, but I normally research things that come to mind. I don't care how stupid it may be or how dumb it may sound. That's the reason why I research it, so I can figure out how either dumb or intelligent I am. Because sometimes you be thinking something is dumb and you be smart than a mug and you don't even realize it because you're not looking into it to see why is this thought coming to my mind. And in my opinion, a lot of that is that ancestral DNA that begins to blossom and make you think more and make you be like, And I just think that information wise, if you research the things that make you go, a little bit more, your life would be so much more fulfilled. That will help to fill that those holes that you feel within of emptiness because your body, your soul is saying, dang, it's something I'm putting on your mind. You're gonna look into it, you're gonna research it, you're gonna find out more. I'm dropping the hints, the Holy Spirit, the anointing, the Christ within, whatever you want to call it, it's giving you the power, it's giving you the information, it's dropping those seeds, as we like to say, into our soul, and it takes us to go to the next step. It takes us to research, it takes us to be willing to read a book, gather information. I mean, they got audiobooks. We be talking about the same stuff sometimes all the time. Get a damn audiobook. Turn that thing on and do whatever you was gonna do regardless because you was gonna do that and the book could be playing. You don't have to consciously read the books all the time. Sometimes if you just let it play, it's almost like, a repetition type thing. In the back of your mind, your subconscious is picking up off of it. And sometimes you will recognize something and you will stop it and you can you can rewind and hear it again as many times as you want to until you get it. Information, comprehension, communication. Get with it. Speaking Freedom TV. Tap in.
Dr. Casey, a lot of people don't realize that while they're walking, they're breathing at the same time. So
Right. right.
So sometimes you have to bring things right down to see spot run. But that's another.
When I go on my walks, when it's warm enough for me to go on walks, I go with my blunt and my book. I'm going to listen to this book,
The
and this
BB.
blunt is going to make me dang on interpret what it's saying even better because I'm going to be thinking even more deeply about whatever it is speaking to my soul. So, yeah, that's how.
See, Dr. Casey, every time I try to walk away, you pull me back in. See, we can walk and smoke that blunt, but you got to get vaccinated.
Well, I'm not even smoking the blunt with you because you vaccinated. I really don't like to share my blunt. I am a selfish blunt smoker, so I go pre-roll wherever I go, and I keep my blunt to myself because that's the way I roll.
You see these two things here? They ain't bullets, but anyway, we'll be. But anyway, hey, great show tonight. I'm glad.
Oh, James.
Yes.
So you were thinking of either one or two popes. So the pope for the first part of the 1960s was John the 23rd. He passed away in 63, and then the rest of the 60s into the deep 70s was Pope Paul VI.
Okay. Yeah, I knew it was somewhere, but I just couldn't get the Johns and the Pauls. But yeah, but I definitely remember the stance of the Vatican when it came to interracial marriages and as far as interracial dating and things like that. But great show tonight. Enjoyed everybody's comments. Look forward to talking to everybody next Monday, and have a good week.
All right.
Adios, amigos.
Take care.
See you Thursday, Bill.
Yes, sir. I will see you Thursday as well.
All right. We got to keep you awake this time, though.
Yeah, well, I was exhausted. I'd been running and ripping and traveling and editing videos and posting articles. I was